Hey everyone, welcome to the AnexiPod, the official podcast for Anexinet. This is episode 5 for July 28th, 2016. I'm your host, Ned Bellavance, Enterprise Architect for Infrastructure Solutions at Anexinet, and avid Albatross aficionado. Here on the AnexiPod, we talk technology for the enterprise, covering infrastructure, app dev, analytics, and anything else that is shiny. On this episode, we will be checking out the AnexiBytes and talking to Microsoft MVP and all-around excellent guy, Paul Cunningham, about the future of Exchange 2016 to infinity and beyond. Today's interview runs a little on the long side, and I think it's an excellent listen, so I'm going to forego my customary post-intro rant in the interest of saving time. Fret not, dear listener. Next AnexiPod will be chock full of ranty goodness. Now on to the AnexiBytes. Microsoft announces Server 2016 at Ignite. At the World Partner Conference in Toronto, Microsoft announced that Windows Server 2016 will in fact be released at this year's Ignite event in Atlanta. I've certainly speculated that this might be the case, and now Microsoft has confirmed my suspicions. Since this was no big surprise, I am acutely curious if they will have something else up their sleeve. Azure Stack 2.0? Everyone gets a HoloLens? Who knows, but I'm excited to find out. Softbank will purchase ARM for $32 billion. The mega acquisitions just keep coming. This time, Japan-based Softbank will be purchasing the UK chipmaker for a cool $32 billion. Speculation has already started about what this could mean for the Internet of Things industry and for Apple, who licenses ARM features for their custom Apple silicon. Overall, I am concerned about ARM's ability to continue to innovate after being acquired, as happens with so many other acquisitions, but as long as SoftBank takes a hands-off approach, I think our Raspberry Pis are pretty safe. Cisco announces their FD.io project, aka FIDO. FD.io, VPP, and DPDK are 3 new acronyms to add to your personal alphabet soup. VPP is the Vector Packet Processing Library, developed by Cisco, and now part of the open-source FD.io project. The Data Plane Development Kit, DPDK, is hardware-based packet processing libraries and drivers meant to accelerate the processing of packets on commodity hardware. FIDO is working to increase the possible I/O throughput of commodity hardware through a combination of software and hardware-based packet processing technologies. Cisco and VMware are making nice? Speaking of Cisco and opening up to partnerships, Cisco announced that their SDN platform ACI will be configurable from within this vSphere console by using a plugin. Additionally, automated configuration tasks can be realized by using the vRealize automation suite, meaning that admins can use a single tool to manage both SDN environments. At a protocol level, there's still a lot of work to get both systems working in a more integrated manner. But these moves signal that Cisco is extending an olive branch to VMware. Let's hope VMware accepts and reciprocates. Coming up next, my interview with Paul Cunningham. Hey everyone, I am joined today by the esteemed Paul Cunningham. For those that don't know, Paul is an independent consultant, writer, and trainer who specializes in Exchange Server and Office 365. He's a Microsoft MVP for Office servers and services, an author and co-author of several books about Exchange and Office 365, and also creates training courses for Pluralsight. Paul runs the ExchangeServerPro.com website and the newly launched Practical365.com. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Thank you, Ned. Very happy to be here.
Awesome. I hadn't heard about Practical 365. What's that site all about?
It's brand new. I'm just putting the final touches on it this week, and I should have it up and running by next week. It's just a natural consequence, I guess, of the evolution of messaging to the cloud, and Office 365 being more than just Exchange. There's a lot more there to explore than just the Exchange Online components of it. And in particular, we've been writing the book, Office 365 for IT pros. That's been written and maintained for the last couple of years. There's a lot outside of the Exchange space to cover, so I thought it's time to step sort of outside those lines and start a new site and keep doing what I do there. So it's good fun. I like it's like starting all over again with a new website. It's actually quite a lot of fun.
Oh
Very
boy,
refreshing.
yeah, building that whole look and feel of the website, and it's kind of like looking at that blank canvas. What are you going to put on it?
Well, yeah, I mean, Exchange Server Pro is nearly 10 years old. It's gone through a lot of changes to get where it is today, but it's certainly there's a few things I would have done differently from the start had I known better back then. So I get a little chance to approach things with a bit more experience under my belt as well.
Right, your chance to make new mistakes all over again.
I've made plenty of new mistakes. Don't worry about that. Yeah, just hopefully not too many of the old ones.
Yeah. So, how long have you been working with Exchange?
Well, as long as I've been in the industry. So I started in IT back in my first job was in 1999. Snuck in during the Y2K bug and all the hiring spree that was going on back then, and actually came out of we closed up a small business that we had before that, which was in the amusement machine industry. So that was pinball machines and coin-operated arcade machines and video games. We shut that down just in the years prior to that, and I just did a little bit of retraining and entered IT and a help desk role, and we were using Exchange 5.5 there. And so that was my first exposure to it, just from a help desk and basic administration point of view.
Right.
And it's just basically always been there ever since. I've worked in managed service providers and consulting companies and in-house IT, and with the exception of one company I worked for, which ran group-wise for their own internal mail, I've always used and supported Exchange. So 5.5, 2000, 2003, and, onwards and upwards. And they were all just a part of the general roles that I was in, but somewhere around 2006 maybe. Or it must have been around 2007, sorry, because obviously Exchange 2007 came out around then.
Mm-hmm.
I lucked into a role that was more of an Exchange specialist role. Things kind of took off from there. It was a good time to be a messaging specialist. Lots going on with the shift from Exchange 2003 to Exchange 2007 and all the new stuff with the server roles architecture and PowerShell for administration and all those sort of things. It was a really interesting time to focus on the product and specialize in it. I just kept at it. So, and here I am today.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel you. I started out with Exchange 5.5 as well and worked my way up through the rungs. I was on help desk with 5.5 and then actually got to do some of the upgrades after that. And I feel like I agree. The big change was 2007 and the introduction to PowerShell. It was just what a different product from there on out.
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
Exchange 2016 was released in October of last year, and they actually came out with 2016 before it even started, unlike Server 2016, which we're still waiting on. So at this point, we're up to...
Curve. The Exchange team's always ahead of the curve, yeah.
Yeah, they really are. I think I remember for 2007, they rewrote their own SMTP engine because they were tired of using the one built into IIS. So they're always blazing the path, right?
Yeah, definitely.
I did hear that Server 2016 will come out at Ignite this year, so that's no longer that will actually make the cutoff.
Yeah, that's normal too. They kind of sneak into the big marketing event. It's a good chance to launch a product like that, isn't it?
Yeah, you would think so. So we're up to CU2 for Exchange 2016. Have you started implementing Exchange 2016 with customers, or are people still a little hesitant because the ultra special SP1 is not out yet?
Well, there's no SP1, and there never will be. So it's the old saying that Exchange ain't done until SP1 is gone. You can't really wait. I think the idea of waiting for SP1, there was reasons for that. A lot of the times the RTM version of the Exchange products shipped either with what you might call stability issues, or maybe what you might call sort of missing features and things that were just on the roadmap that they they included in Service Pack 1. And that was true of 2007 and 2010 and 2013. So I respect that point of view that some customers might have today, that they need to sit and wait. But Exchange 2016 is a slightly different beast. Like, it's more like Exchange 2013 Service Pack 2. Like, they're so similar. They're built on virtually the same code base. There wasn't a massive shift to a new code base or anything like that. The feature set is largely the same. It's proven to be quite solid and stable and reliable pretty much right from the RTM. So we're up to CU2 now, so it's been out about 6 months. And, there hasn't been, a massive list of issues that they've needed to fix or resolve before people feel comfortable deploying it, or before they should feel comfortable deploying it. So I think we're seeing slightly faster uptake for 2016 than we did for 2013. Customers seem to be a little bit more confident in going early, knowing that it is such a sort of a close cousin to 2013.
Yeah, I definitely got that impression from the presentations at last year's Ignite and playing around with it in the lab. It's it really is, like you said, it's SP2 for 2013. It borrows on so many of the common features. It didn't feel like a migration so much as just okay, here's a few new servers and we'll get them integrated and then we'll cut some stuff over when we're ready. If I am sitting on Exchange 2013 today, what's the main motivator to get onto Exchange 2016?
Yeah, well, the products are very similar, but they're not. That's not to say that 2016 doesn't bring anything new to the table. It's as always, they deliver a few performance and stability improvements in the database engine, things like that. Some of the user-facing experience is a little better. So in particular, the webmail, which they used to call Outlook Web App and is now called Outlook on the Web. It's always improving. Every version of Exchange has a better webmail experience, and 2016 makes some improvements over 2013 there as well. So if you have, just as one example, if you have a lot of remote access or webmail usage in your organization, there's an obvious win. In the high availability space, with the way the DAGs operate, they're continuing to make some improvements there. I think the thing to keep in mind, though, is that if you're planning your strategy long term, 2016 obviously has a longer mainstream support and period. For one thing, being released 3 years later than 2013. So if you invest in a 2013 deployment today, you've got to think about when that mainstream support period is going to end and what you're going to do next. Yeah, it's all the innovation is happening now in 2016. Is probably the other thing to really consider. New features, improvements under the hood will largely come to 2016. You can consider 2013 to be mostly feature complete and locked in at this point. They'll fix bugs, obviously, and if there's something they can easily retrofit to it. I don't speak on behalf of the Microsoft Exchange product group, but this is the impression I get. Most of the new things and the innovation is happening with the Exchange 2016 code base.
Right, and that makes sense. I mean, they're not going to add any crazy new features to 2013. They want to get people on the newer product. And I think if you're in a hybrid configuration, at some point they're going to make you go to Exchange 2016, at least for the server that is providing the hybrid connection up to Exchange Online, correct?
Well, that's always possible. I think that 2013 will probably be supported as long as you stay up to date with the latest cumulative updates and, at least until the mainstream support period has ended. I think it would be a little bit controversial if they dropped hybrid support while the product was still technically supported.
Right.
But, you always have to consider that the latest product probably gives you the best experience. So I wouldn't be shocked to hear that something about the way hybrid configuration works, a year or two from now, only works if you have 2016 and gives you you miss out on something if you only have 2013. There's that possibility that, something will happen there, but, it'd be hard to predict where that's going to go. I just think, generally speaking, these days, across all your IT stack, like not just Exchange, staying up to date is a really good mantra. Like, you really should be pushing to stay up to date and not sit on, have a process where you're evaluating new products and getting them out if you can, rather than, look for reasons not to deploy it, like actively pursue upgrades. If you find a reason not to deploy it, that's fair enough. But the idea that you just sort of sit on what you're comfortable with and wait 3 or 4 years and then do big bang upgrades to whatever comes out then, It's a pretty old way of thinking, and I think that's where people run into more problems than if they just kept up to date over the years with the new releases as they came out.
Yeah, I've certainly encountered that things that there's some companies that just like to sit and wait and do that big bang every 5 years, and maybe that worked 10 years ago, but now the technology is moving so fast that if you're going to try to do that big bang upgrade, it's going to generate a ton of headaches for you. And I've been through those painful upgrades. People that are still running Exchange 2003 that want to get moved over to 2013 or something, it's not pleasant.
No.
If they just kind of rolled with it the whole time, they'd be in a much more comfortable situation right now.
Yeah, doing that incremental improvement, incremental upgrade sort of process, small amounts of pain at a time rather than large amounts of pain every few years.
Right. And I feel like, especially with 2013 and 2016, that migration process was not nearly as painful as when you were going from 03 to 07 or 07 to 2010 even.
No, not. I mean, the 2013 and 2016 coexist side by side, perfectly. Like they can. Normally, you have to put the latest version of Exchange sort of in front of the older ones in terms of how clients connect and things like that. So you always have that part of your project where you cut over to the new version of Exchange before you've actually even moved any mailboxes, but you have to cut over, client connectivity and things like that. You don't have that with 2016 because they can. 2013 and 2016 can proxy to each other perfectly well. So you don't have to have 2016 in front of 2013. You can just sort of have them side by side and, do all your testing with the 2016 server off to the side, maybe add it into your load balancer pool or whatever. And you got a little bit more control over when you do that cutover of the connectivity. So it's almost seamless. Like it really is a lot smoother than what we had to go through for a lot of the previous upgrade scenarios.
Right, yeah, I remember the legacy namespace and getting that into the SAN cert and all of that and trying to explain to the client why they have to do all this crazy stuff. Not having to tell that story makes me happy.
Yeah, all that stuff wasn't very well understood. I don't know if that was just, it wasn't well explained at first or just a lot of conversations around that and the requirements and why do I have to buy another certificate when I've already got one and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I'm glad to see the end of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of the end, do you think that this might be the last version of Exchange?
This question was actually asked. I was on a panel at the last year's IT Dev Connections in Vegas.
Okay.
We usually wrap up the Exchange track there with just an open Q&A, and that was one of the questions we were asked there as well. And the panelists all answered differently, and my answer was no, I don't think it's the last version of Exchange. Obviously, they're still developing the product because it's the same code that runs in the cloud for Office 365 for Exchange Online. So there's still development happening. Whether they have another branded version of Exchange is sort of a separate question. I think that Microsoft will release, an Exchange 2019 or 2020 or maybe even a 2017 or 18. Who knows?
Right.
We're used to these sort of 3-year release cadences, but they could change that. What they miss out on if they don't do another branded release is the marketing event. And, even if from a technology point of view, it's not a big leap, it's just a continued evolution. Technology marketing departments like something that they can announce and promote and, put a big effort behind and drive sales and things like that. So whether that matters to Microsoft's bottom line or not remains to be seen. Like in a few years, if the cloud revenue is so enormous and the on-premises footprint is so small that they don't need that kind of sugar hit from a new marketing push for a new release of Exchange, they might not do it. They might switch to just doing the incremental, Exchange 2016 cumulative update model forever. But as long as that footprint on premises is large enough and the impact is big enough, my bet would be, they'll brand another version of Exchange and do a big launch and things like that.
Right. That was sort of my feeling as well. I was just curious because, Configuration Manager, they have done away with the next version of Configuration Manager, and now it's just supposed to be, it'll always be Config Manager, and they're going to do releases year and month when it comes out. So the most recent is going to be 1606, which is already late, but that's what they're calling it. But yeah, that's just the way they're going to do Configuration Manager, at least until the marketing people change their minds and say, oh no, we need a Config Manager 2020 or something.
Yeah.
So
that versioning makes sense. I mean, I don't see any reason why Exchange couldn't switch to that versioning model.
Mm-hmm.
And then you always have a sense of what you're getting yourself into. Like there's a difference between 2016, cumulative update 5 and 2018. Like there's a sense that there's been a definite evolution or growth of the product at that point. But the flip side of that is, and it's probably true across a lot of the server products, that they're so mature these days that even though a lot may change in terms of features and behavior, like under the hood, they're so similar now with the there's such incremental change between the versions that maybe it doesn't make sense to do the big bang launch of a new product, but who knows? You can never tell. It's all going to be driven by marketing people and business people who make decisions about money and less about technology, I think.
Right. Yeah. I guess marketing's got to have their say, right?
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. Can't live without them.
So leading to that, I mean, people have been asking me when I'm out at client sites, is Microsoft going to keep making an on-premise Exchange version, or are they just going to force everyone to an Exchange Online? I think you've pretty much already stated your case, which is they're going to keep making a version of Exchange for on-prem as long as the people want to deploy it on-premise, right?
Right, and that's their public position as well. They made a statement probably a couple of years ago to that effect. We'll make the product if the demand is there. Maybe the voice of the small business customer is not as powerful in that conversation as some of their, great big enterprise and government customers. But as long as there are markets that require that on-premises version, I think they'll continue to make it, especially considering, like I said, the code base is the same, the development of the product is basically the same. There are parts of the world where the cloud is not very popular for various reasons, whether that's perception-based or because of regulations or laws or because the network bandwidth isn't widely available at a low enough price to make cloud services viable. And so as long as they have enough demand there to justify it, for sure, they'll keep delivering the on-premises product. I can't imagine at some point there'll be such a shrunken portion of the world demanding an on-premises product that they may just say, we're not for you. But it would have to be pretty small at that point for them to walk away from that market. And the cloud would have to be well and truly, the way things are done at that point.
Right. It's definitely, at this point, it's no means every customer I go to has no Exchange in their environment. They've all gone to Office 365. The smaller ones, for the most part, have. But like you said, some of the bigger ones are ones that have some sort of regulation or something that requires them to keep it on-prem. They're happy to do so, and I'm happy to help them out.
You got maybe some legacy application requirements or something. I always say to customers, consider the Office 365 first. That should be option one, and then find a reason not to do it. It should be, these days I don't try to justify the cloud. I try to say you try and find a reason not to go with the cloud. Rarely do we encounter a legitimate reason. There's plenty of personal and emotional reasons. I've met customers who just don't like the idea of subscription-based, online services and monthly payments, and it feels like, I don't know, to them it feels like, one of them told us that it feels too much like paying taxes, and he just can't handle it. He likes plunking down a few $1,000s at a time for a server upgrade or whatever, and none of this monthly payment stuff, which makes me wonder how he pays for things like his phone and electricity and gas or whatever. But that's an emotional decision for that person. It's not something you can really talk them out of with a business case.
Yeah, no. When people make an emotional decision, rationality is really not going to help you out there.
No.
I guess you just got to let them burn through their idea and then maybe discover it on their own that it makes more sense.
Well, you can't help everyone. It's, and maybe it's not the right time for them. In a year or two it will be. You never know.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of the future of Exchange in other ways, there's sort of a move in application development to develop modern applications that work on this 12-factor model. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the 12-factor thing.
Not at all, no.
So the idea...
I'm not a developer, but I like to pretend there's something.
I'm not a developer either. But unfortunately, I've read developer things. No, I shouldn't say unfortunately. Developers are fine. They're lovely people, and without them, we'd have no software. So the 12-factor app idea is that the application, the front end is stateless. You can spin up a whole bunch of instances of it and spin them down. So, using containers, there's some sort of shared bus, and all the different components all talk over REST APIs and HTTPS. Do you ever think Exchange is going to move to sort of a more modern application delivery, or is it going to stay like a much more traditional application?
Well, in many ways, it already has. We used to have the server roles architecture in 2007, where everything got spread out into these individual server roles, which you could call sort of an early approach at doing microservices for a server product like Exchange. But then everything consolidated back into what is now a single server role. But it's not a monolithic piece of, there are so many individual services and components under the hood all talking to each other that in a lot of ways, even just a single Exchange server does behave like in that sort of microservices model. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure I'm offending a lot of people who are sort of microservices purists who are saying, no, it couldn't possibly be the case. But I always look at Exchange as a service, not a server. So if you have one server, it's really easy to think of it as a server, but it is in fact it's a collection of services. And if you scale that out to 2, 3, 4, 12, 16 servers with high availability and site resilience, you need to stop thinking about individual services and you need to start thinking about the service as a whole. And that's where even Exchange looks at itself in that sense, where it doesn't so much worry about a service being started or stopped or anything like that. It's doing its own internal monitoring and health probes based on the user experience and how components are working together, and then making its own reactive decisions based on that. And then you scale that out to Office 365, and of course that's a perfect example of a microservices model where, I can only imagine at any given point in time how much of the Exchange Online infrastructure is failed, at that point in time, and not in terms of disk failures or complete server failures, and not only in terms of failures, but what they're upgrading seamlessly, what they're deploying to scale out and add more capacity seamlessly, what they're decommissioning to remove old infrastructure. And none of that would be possible if Exchange hadn't been completely re-architected since the 2010 days to really operate in that way. We just don't really get to see it because it's all sort of hidden away from us within the server product that we install on premises or, behind the scenes with Office 365 itself.
Right. Yeah. In the past, when I've had to peel back the layers of Exchange and take a look at all the services and see when one's failed, it is surprising to see how many separate services are running on a single server simultaneously and how they're all talking to each other over some kind of bus, right? Yeah. I would love to get a tour of Exchange online and sort of find out how they're doing everything behind the scenes. I'm sure Microsoft would never do it, right? Trade secrets and all that.
A physical tour. There are data center tours, but they're kind of more of a here's what a data center looks like, rather than pointing at a thing and saying those servers are literally running, Exchange Online. But they do have a few interesting presentations that you can find online. So at last year's Ignite, you'll find one of the product group. It's called Exchange Online Behind the Curtain, I think it's called.
Oh, okay.
And it's a full-length Ignite presentation where he basically talks about how they run the service.
Okay.
And it's fascinating. It really is. You get to see a lot of interesting Microsoft views of how the service runs. So, clearly, for example, they can't monitor the health of 100,000 servers or whatever it is, all individually. But what they can monitor is, anomalies, what deviates from the normal pattern, in whether it's geographic region or a particular protocol or things like that. It's if you have an hour, sit down and watch it because it's really, really interesting to go from being an on-premises infrastructure type person where you're probably used to pinging servers and watching for services being up and down, to then seeing how they approach it and all the machine learning and the intelligence that they apply to it and what it actually takes for, self-healing, self-repair, all the things that can happen before a problem is even escalated to a human being, and how we've benefited from that, because when, your server fails in your data center, it's your problem to deal with. You maybe have to get on the call to Microsoft support or whatever, but The person who wrote the code doesn't really feel an impact from that, except maybe in bug reports that eventually get escalated to them. But when Exchange Online goes down, it's literally the people who wrote the code and work on the product whose pages go off
Right.
and their phones go off, and they have to dial in and fix it. So, A, they're highly motivated, and B, they get to see the problems firsthand and at great scale where the problems are more likely to appear, and then they can fix them. And I know people like to think the cloud is unreliable sometimes, but I think Office 365 is incredibly stable and reliable, and that's probably directly due to that new approach.
Yeah, it's funny. I've heard people say exactly the same thing, that the cloud is unreliable, the cloud goes down, and then I'm like, all right, look at the uptime for Exchange Online over the last year, and it's got to be like 5 nines, right? What was the uptime for that person's on-premise Exchange server? Because I doubt it was 5 nines, right?
Well, they'll be thinking of unplanned outages. How many times did my server literally fall over and fail? Oh, only once or twice, and I fixed it, within 15 minutes. Yeah, but how much time did you spend doing maintenance? Having that thing down for planned outages and all that sort of thing. Things you just don't have to worry about in the cloud. I only just joked like yesterday on Twitter. I said, look, at some point you use so many cloud services that every day something is down. Something's gone, there's always a problem, and it's just the nature of this. It's the scale. Like you can't have 100,000 servers in the cloud and millions of customers and mailboxes without some portion of that being unhealthy at any given point in time.
Right. Yeah.
100% uptime is a pipe dream, and the SLA that they've got and how they meet that is really impressive.
Yeah. You got to plan to fail and plan to fail gracefully, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, the other thing I was curious about with Exchange is, most of Azure runs on, they according to Microsoft, they've been running Azure on Nano server, or at least decent portions of it for quite some time. And Exchange still requires the full server install, GUI and everything. Do you think they're going to drop that requirement sometime soon?
No, I can't really see it myself.
No.
There's just, I don't doubt they've probably looked at it, but every Exchange server needs some components that, Core and Nano simply don't have. Whether that's, because Exchange still relies on things like IIS and some IIS components. There's audio and video codecs required, at least audio codecs required for the unified messaging services, whether you're using them or not. And I understand the point. Like, I understand why Nano server, why it looks appealing and small footprint and, lots of little disposable application servers. And that's not quite the extent to which you can look at Exchange, even in a highly available deployment. It needs a lot more resources and a lot more permanence than the type of applications that you might deploy on Nano server or even on server core. Right. So, yeah, it's good to think about these things and try and, reduce your own server footprint and run server core for things where you don't need a full GUI. But, yeah, I don't see Exchange falling into that bucket anytime soon.
Yeah, that's a good point about it, like the video codecs and audio codecs. Those definitely don't exist in Core, and they probably have no plans to port them to something that could run in Core, let alone Nano, which nothing runs in Nano right now, really. Hyper-V.
Yeah,
Hyper-V runs in Nano. That's it.
I would have thought there was a few really obvious things that Nano were doing good for. I had to deploy an RAS server just to do some routing within a few virtual environments a couple of months ago, and I was kind of surprised that Nano doesn't support that role yet. It seemed like it would have been a no-brainer to have a little Nano VM or whatever handling some routing inside virtual environments. But there you go.
Yeah, you would think so.
Maybe in the future.
No, I think it's really mostly for containers and Hyper-V. So that can be your hypervisor. Your really bare minimum hypervisor that you almost never need to patch, right? And then you can have all your big bulky VMs sitting on top of it.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
So Exchange Online, obviously a resounding success for Microsoft, but you said sort of branching out from there with more Office 365 components. What are your other big areas of focus you're looking at in Office 365?
Yeah, well, Exchange is it's the low-hanging fruit, I guess. It's one of the it's a service. Email is a service that everyone uses, and it's a relatively easy migration these days to get your email from on-premises into the cloud. And there might be some reasons to leave a few mailboxes, or you still need some services on-premise, and that's why the Exchange hybrid model exists. But by and large, the average knowledge worker with their mailbox and their team of colleagues that they work with, it's really neither here nor there whether their mailbox is on-premise or in the cloud. So it may as well be in the cloud, and that's why I think a lot of organisations lead with Exchange as their first sort of way into Office 365. But once you're there, you are paying in most cases for things that you aren't using immediately, just when you do your mailbox migration. So whether that's OneDrive for Business or Skype for Business Online or SharePoint Online. And so you sort of switch from that migration model to thinking about how you can better adopt those online services. I think that's probably the larger challenge once customers are ready to go to the cloud, is then exploiting the cloud and leveraging the cloud to further improve their systems. I would say that quick wins, after you've got your email in there, is probably certainly getting Skype for Business deployed, even if it's just for instant messaging within your organisation, and people, being able to host their own meetings and things like that. Whether you put the telephony in there as well is kind of a separate question. But just the IM and the audio and video conferencing is really valuable stuff once people start using it, instead of having to pick up the phone all the time and send emails all the time. And then there's, getting rid of other parts of your legacy on-premises infrastructure, and file servers are probably one of the next good candidates for that. They're one of the oldest things to deal with, the old file shares and file servers and clusters and all that, and they're just chock full of information that in a lot of cases organizations don't even realize they have, let alone make use of. But it's sitting there, it's not indexed, nobody even knows what most of it is. And so getting that into the cloud is probably the next big project that I think a lot of customers would end up looking at.
Right. And
so shifting from the file server model and to shift into SharePoint Online and team sites and document libraries and things like that. And it's a big ask. There'll be a lot of data that you don't really need to move, or maybe you just do move it, kind of dump it in there and leave it. You can always search for it and find it if you need to. But when you go from file servers into SharePoint Online, you get just a little bit of extra value you can add on to your business processes. So things like document versioning become a lot easier to manage, collaborating on the same documents, adding little workflows to your documents, not having to send email attachments around anymore. You can start, just sending links to documents in document libraries. And the same is true also for getting people's personal, My Documents, moving that into OneDrive for Business. And, you don't have to worry about hosting all those home drives on premises anymore, and people can just have their own personal OneDrive area and sync to their client when they need it, when they're on a plane or anything like that. So after email and you've got that bedded in, I think SharePoint Online is probably one of the best things for people to look at next.
Yeah, those file shares can be a real rabbit hole. I always cringe a little bit when I have to find something on a file share, because it's not really searchable. It's not really tagged in any way. Maybe it's structured, but then somebody probably screwed up the structure.
Yeah. And we thought we had a great permissions model, and, and you can, put things in the hands of the users. Like why should IT be managing permissions on file shares? Why not just team sites and document libraries and let people manage their own teams and departments and control who gets access to what, and get a lot of that low value administration out of the hands of IT and into the people who really need to be able to do it themselves. Another good one is Office 365 groups. There's a lot you can gain from leveraging Office 365 groups. So that's a collection of services. An Office 365 group is basically, it's a little bit like a distribution group, but it has its own mailbox where it tracks conversation history. Its own shared calendar where you can put project meetings or team meetings, its own shared document library so you can collaborate, a OneNote notebook. It pulls it all together into one little sort of self-contained unit that really helps people to collaborate in a much more seamless way. So, if you think about like an example of like a long-running software deployment project, they start out and then 1 month into it, they've held, 4 meetings already, and only the people who attended those meetings have access to those meeting notes, and they've been emailing documents back and forth to each other, and then a new member joins the team, and there's all that history that they've missed out on is not available to them until someone forwards them all the documents and forwards them a whole bunch of key email chains and things like that. Whereas if they've been handling it all through an Office 365 group, it's all centrally managed and stored and hosted, and people can sort of come in and out of projects as they're part of the project starts and ends, especially for long-running projects. And all that information is just right there and available for them.
I actually started using those fairly recently, and they have been awesome since I do a lot of project work, and who the resources are on that project shifts. Being able to just add that person to the group and be like, all right, here's all the documents, here's the email chains, here's the calendar of events, go to it, let me know if you have questions. It's awesome. It makes total sense. What's funny is that, so there's one feature in Office 2016 that has got to be my absolute favorite feature that they've ever created. When you create a new email and you go to attach a document, it shows you all your recently opened documents, and then it lets you attach a document as a shared document out of your OneDrive. It's like, that is hands down my favorite feature.
Because 9 times out of 10, the document you're about to email is the one you literally were just working on. So
yeah, exactly. And then if I can send them a shared version of it from my OneDrive, if they want to make edits to it, they can just edit it and share it, and they don't have to email it back to me. It's just already in there for me.
It's all really good stuff, and it's just it's a little bit of user adoption and user training required. I think that's why email is so easy, because email is email. They're still just using Outlook, and they're still behaving in the same way they used to. But once you start using the other services, you do need to invest in a little bit of guidance and training, and have some sort of champions in the business who are leading the way to show people how things are done. So there's a little bit of friction, a little bit of a hurdle to get over, but once you do, you should expect productivity to really improve within your organization.
Yeah, we've been using Skype for Business for a while, and one of the other guys on my team did a Skype for Business presentation about a month ago, showing people, okay, here's how you do this, here's how you do that. Just, little things that he figured most people would know, but maybe not. And so many people walked up to him afterwards and were like, I didn't even know the software could do that. I didn't know that was there. And I was like, you've had this product easily for a year, but you had no idea it had all this capability. And all you need is that little bit of training and knowledge transfer. And now you can go be more productive with something you already had.
Yeah, and you can't understate the importance of helping your organization adopt these services. Now you can just migrate to the cloud and keep doing things the old way, but I think you'll just be spending money on either things you're not using at all or not using to their best potential, and that's maybe where some of the cost-benefit analysis that some companies do breaks down. They don't really see the point in spending what might even be the same amount of money as they were spending on premises for no measurable improvement, whereas if they just invest a little bit more, they can really reap the benefits in terms of productivity and user satisfaction and things like that. It's definitely it's a good investment of time. It's a good investment of money.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you get so much with like the E3 license in Office 365. It's a lot to take in all at once, but if you can just kind of like parcel that out over a period of time, there are so many things. There's Delve, which I just started looking at. I don't even know what it does really, but I know I have it.
Yeah, Delve's it's actually, it's very useful. If you're storing your documents in the cloud, like in OneDrive and in SharePoint Online, then it can surface your own documents as well as things that other people are working on that you might be really interested in. That's, I can think of a lot of cases in my past where that would have been super handy. Like I was, your own team or even just yourself and your own initiative, you start looking at something and working on a few documents, and then you put all this time in and discover that someone else down the hallway on a different floor of the building had already done that, and they just hadn't told anyone, or you hadn't discovered it on your own. If Delve can surface that kind of information and help you find people who are working on the same things or knowledgeable about the same things, that's really valuable. But you make a good point, like the E3 license, there's a lot to take in and a lot of services to look at, but it's not as daunting when you think that just because you decide now we're going to explore, that option or that service that we're already paying for, you can just start using it. You don't need to install any servers or deploy any software. It's already there waiting for you to just, light it up, maybe do a little bit of configuration and exploration. And there's not a major effort required as you go through maybe your first year of Office 365 adoption to start making use of these services one at a time.
Yeah, I could definitely see like an adoption plan that, at least over a year, have the trainers maybe come back and say, okay, now let's learn about this, now let's learn about that, because I know your average worker doesn't want to sit there and learn about 26 different features. They want, a couple features, let me try them out, and then I'll come back and try the next few.
Yeah, and if you're working with a partner, your partner should be helping you with that too. So if your partner is just a migration expert, then they're kind of probably not going to be around for forever.
Right.
I mean, Microsoft's got their fast track program, their onboarding center. They're trying to make the migration process as simple and fast and smooth as possible, because that's really the low value work, is the onboarding. It's that post-migration adoption that smart partners will be looking at helping customers with the most. So if you have that responsibility internally, definitely that should be your focus. Is not just cutting the data across and sitting back and letting people work the old way. Is you can actually deliver value to your own organisation by being a champion for Office 365 adoption. Since you're already paying for it, it's up to you then to push the adoption and start taking advantage of those services. Right.
Change track a little bit. One of the things I like to ask people, especially people who are successful, is if you were talking to a junior admin who's looking to grow and prosper in their career, what sort of things what advice would you give them? What should they be working on or looking into?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in the industry, so it's close to 17 years now, and I've had a lot of jobs, and I haven't left many of those jobs by choice. So there's been a lot of outsourcing, downsizing, some bankruptcies for companies that I worked for, mergers, divestitures. It's a tough industry at times to be in. Things can change very quickly. First and foremost, I think you have to understand that you are your number one priority. If you're working for an organization that has a lot of legacy on-premises technology, is doing things the old way, and you might be perfectly happy there for now, you really have to think about what might be the case, tomorrow or a month from now or 6 months from now, when that company doesn't exist or that role doesn't exist. So keeping yourself up to date with technology, even if you're not directly involved with it, is pretty important. But that said, there's a lot out there to learn. There's way more in IT, even just as an IT pro. Like, forget about the development side of things. There's too much for any one person to know. So you do have to be a little bit selective about what you spend your time staying up to date with and keeping your skills fresh with. And that's going to vary just depending on your own interests and what's good in your market. Some skills sort of concentrate in certain areas of the world and not so much in others. But it's really important, not to sit back and coast, because if you just relax and don't learn anything new for an entire year, well, you've effectively put yourself a year behind everyone else in the job market. And that's, I think, a risky place to be in the current IT industry. The other thing to keep in mind, or at least from my own experience, is that when jobs are lost, they tend to be lost in the most easily disposable areas. So if you don't have a direct and obvious value that you're delivering to the organization, you might be the first to go. So if you like to sit in the back room with your head down and your headphones on and never speak to anyone, and you just kind of keep the server room running and the lights on and no one ever really understands what you do, that's not delivering a whole heap of value to the business. So you need to try and find ways to make yourself valued to an organization. But I don't want to sort of make it all about negative stuff like keeping your job and all that sort of thing. I think that probably even more importantly, like from a positive point of view, is there's so much opportunity in the world in IT at the moment, and the ability to work for a lot of organizations remotely. You can work from home, work remotely, work in distributed teams, large multinationals. a lot of really exciting companies, startups, not just in technology, but in other industries that are starting up and they're moving really fast and they're iterating quickly and being really innovative. There's a lot of opportunity out there. So if you want to pursue something better than what you're currently doing, you need to really aggressively go after it. No one's going to hand you the perfect job. You need to actually seek those jobs out. And the way to do that is to keep your skills up to date, keep yourself reasonably well known, do networking, do some blogging, be visible online. And, keeping all that up, it can be amazing what doors actually start to open for you. Like I said, it can be a brutal industry with, outsourcing and downsizing and companies going bust and that sort of thing. But at the same time, it can also be a really exciting and really rewarding career if you approach it the right way.
Right. I totally agree. Very well said. So
don't fall in love with anything. So it's in my time, I've seen people who loved the hardware and loved running servers, and they looked at things like VMware and virtualization, and they went, "That'll never take off. I don't like that stuff," and they didn't pay attention to it, and all of a sudden, it really hurt them. And the same goes for Office 365. I've seen plenty of people who are like, the cloud, not interested. It's not good. It's not secure. It's not reliable, whatever. On-prem services all the way. All they've done is set themselves back quite a few years. And sometimes things get taken away from you, things that you loved working on. Customers don't want to buy anymore. Organizations don't want to deploy. Just enjoy your time and move on to the next thing. You'll have a long career if you do.
Yeah, like you said, the rate of change and the pace of change in IT is so rapid, and it only seems to be increasing. So it is hard to stay on top of whatever the latest and greatest is, especially since it's such a broad platform too, right? You can't know everything, like you said.
No, you can't. And you can't always chase the latest and greatest. Like, things go through their own little maturity cycle. Some people happen to work in companies and environments where being on the cutting edge is required. So if you're a consultant or someone who's leading IT strategies for customers or for businesses, you need to be out on the front of the wave. But if you don't have that role, you can kind of ignore what's hyping up as the latest and greatest thing and just let it go through a bit of a maturity cycle before it sort of takes hold. And then you can be a little bit more selective about where you spend your time. But you definitely don't want to be only just coming around to something relevant to your career when it's already on the down cycle and when all of the opportunity is past.
Right. There's a quote from, I think it's Douglas Adams, where he said something along the lines of, anything that's in the world when you're born is normal and ordinary. Anything that's invented when you're like in your teens and 30s, 20s and 30s is exciting and revolutionary. And anything invented after you're 35 is against the natural order of things. So I'm over 35.
Yeah, it feels that way sometimes, yeah.
And so maybe it's becoming a bit of a struggle, right, to just accept new things and be like, that's got real potential. It's not just marketing fluff. So I try not to keep my skeptic dial turned up too high sometimes.
Well, you can't work in a technology industry and then fight innovation. You can't. It's the opposite of what you should be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're coming up on the hour. So before I let you go, the one question I like to ask everyone, and I don't want you to think about it too hard, what is your favorite 80s movie?
Ooh. Oh, I know the answer. It's Stripes with Bill Murray.
Excellent. That's an awesome answer. That's one of my favorites as well.
I've watched that movie hundreds of times.
It actually holds up, which some 80s movies really don't.
It does. And I saw a version of it. I can't remember where I got it from, which is probably means I didn't get it from somewhere you're supposed to, but it had a deleted scene reinserted into it.
Okay.
And that I never saw until only just a few years ago. And if you find that cut of the movie and you watch it, you will agree that scene is just ridiculous and makes not a single bit of sense and doesn't need to be there, but at the same time is utterly hilarious.
All right. I'll have to keep my eye out for that. So if people want to know more about you and what you do and what you're up to, where should they find you on the internets?
Well, I am all over Twitter. I have my websites, my blogs. If you're into the Exchange server stuff, swing by exchangeserverpro.com. check that out. Yeah, if you're more interested in what's happening in the wider world of Office 365, I'd love you to swing by practical365.com and help me grow that site and that community as well.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much, Paul, for joining us today. I really appreciate it. And
my pleasure.
Hopefully we can have you on again sometime.
Sure thing.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. Special thanks go out to our guest, Paul Cunningham, for taking the time to talk with me. If you want to know more about Paul, you can check out his websites, ExchangeServerPro.com and Practical365.com, or follow him on Twitter at ExchangeServPro, that's ExCHSERVPRO. Thanks to Catherine and Patty for helping pull this together and making me look good. Thanks to Lee Rosevere and Professor Click for providing the music for AnexiPod. Thanks to Anexinet for helping me produce this podcast. If you're looking for a company to help with your digital, strategy, or technology needs, then I would recommend reaching out to Anexinet to see how they can help. AnexiPod is produced under a Creative Commons, Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license, which means you can share it, but don't sell it or change it. And finally, thank you for tuning in and listening. Without you, I would just be a lunatic in a room talking to myself. If you'd like to comment on the podcast or contact me in some other way, my Twitter handle is Ned1313, or you can use the hashtag AnexiPod. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, IT moves pretty fast. If you don't stop to look around once in a while, you could miss it.